Hello student, today we have started the unit 2 from geology paper 3. Our paper title is field geology and hydrogeology. We already completed the unit number 1, that is the geological mapping and surveying. In unit 2 there are unit 2 on groundwater, occurrence of groundwater and groundwater movement. The first topic in the unit 2, that is the groundwater. What is the definition of groundwater? It is a branch of geology which deals with the study of occurrence, movement and quantitative and qualitative study of groundwater. Qualitative study of under groundwater or subsurface water is called as groundwater. It is also known as hydrogeology. Groundwater science, it is also known as hydrogeology. Why the importance of groundwater in the civil engineering and geology? The role of civil engineer not only construct the dam and reservoir but also the fulfillment of future demand of water supply for domestic as well as agriculture and irrigation and drinking water purpose and industrial purposes. Okay, our country population which is over 1.3 billion on 2020 and it is expected to reach 1.5 billion by 2025. Okay, therefore the demand of water day by day increases for production of their food grains through the irrigation. Okay, I designed one number, that is the world groundwater number. The phone number of world groundwater number, that is 9640120365. What is meant by 96? The first 96 is indication of 9640120365. Last 3 digit of 365, that is the 365 days in a year, and last means from start number 567 120, that is the rainy days in the annual rainy days. How many annual rainy days in the India? Near about 120 days as the rainy days, means the rainfall, rainy season. Out of that only 40 days receives rainfall. Average in India only 40 days receives rainfall, and out of that 40 days only 96 hours continuous rainfall has been fall on the earth surface. Means in India 365 days out of 120 rainy days, out of 40 days as rainy season, and out of that only 40 days as rainy days. What is meant by rainy days? Rainy days means those days have more than 5 mm of the rainfall, called as rainy day. Means in India only 40 days have fall the rain. Okay, out of that only 96 hours rain has been fall on our surface. म्हणजे फक्त 96 तास पाऊस पडतो वर्षभरातला, म्हणून हा मी नंबर डिझाईन केलेला आहे. 96401220 9640120365. Last 3 digits indicate the days in a year. Last 120 is rainy days, 40 days is rainy days in rainy season, and 96 is actual received rainfall in hours. Another number is I designed one number that is called as groundwater number groundwater number of world. That is the 9721905050. हा मोबाईल नंबर सारखा एक नंबर मी डिझाईन केलेला 9721905050 9721905050. The first 97 indicates the saline water presence in the on our earth. म्हणजे जे काय पाणी आहे पृथ्वीवर त्यातलं 97% saline water आहे. 97% water becomes saline. Then second digit indicates fresh water, means 2% water presence in ice cap, northern polar and south polar. These 2% water presence in the form of solid ice. Okay, and last one indicates the fresh water present out of that 100% water. 97 saline water, 2% in the form of ice, and only 1% found fresh water. Out of that 0.9% water presence in running water in the form of river, channel, lakes and dams, and 0.5% water presence in groundwater, and 0.5% in the soil moisture. Okay, these are the rainfall number and groundwater number. Then second, hydrological cycle. What is meant by hydrological cycle? Hydrological cycle means, second point on hydrological cycle, I will send you PPT which covers the hydrological cycle in diagrammatic representation. Hydrological cycle including the evaporation, transportation, then precipitation, rainfall, infiltration. These are the entire process of hydrological cycle. Means if temperature rises, the ocean water gets temperature, water heat, sea water has been evaporated and to form some clouds in the form of condensation, and then after condensation rainfall has been started in the form of precipitation. Okay, after precipitation some amount of water has been run off from mountains, and few amount of water can be recharged into the groundwater is called as infiltration. Means infiltration, precipitation, evaporation and transportation. These are the entire process of hydrological cycle. Okay, I will send you diagrams of hydrological cycle on Google Classroom. Then another important thing is in groundwater, that is groundwater parameters. Groundwater parameters. First, subsurface movement of water. The groundwater is totally depends on some geological parameters, some geological factors. Okay, geological factors. The first one, porosity. What is meant by porosity? Porosity means the wide air gap in the rock. Porosity means the percentage of wide air places in subsurface material or in the rock is called as porosity. The porosity of rock is depends upon the grain size of the rock. If the grain size of the rock is more, if the rock have coarse grain, the porosity is more. If the rock is fine grain, the porosity will be the less. And also the porosity of the rock is depending upon the packing of grain size. Packing of the two grains means packing. If a rounded particle present in a rock, the porosity will be the high. The irregular fragments in the rock, the porosity will be the less. There are two types of porosity: primary porosity and secondary porosity. The primary porosity means which porous spaces in subsurface material develop at the time of formation of rock is called as primary porosity. Primary porosity म्हणजे ज्यावेळेस रॉक तयार होत असतो त्यावेळेस जी पोरॉसिटी डेव्हलप झालेली असते त्याला काय म्हणतो आपण प्रायमरी पोरॉसिटी. अँड सेकंड वन सेकंडरी पोरॉसिटी. सेकंडरी पोरॉसिटी मीन्स those porosity are developed after the formation of rock is called as secondary porosity. For example, fractures is another type of secondary porosity. Vesicles, joints. Suppose for example in vesicular basalt, after the cooling of magma, some of the gases contained are escaped from the rock magma. After cooling, some of the vesicles are developed in the rock called as vesicles. These vesicles is indication of secondary porosity. Then after cooling of magma, some of the joints are developed after the formation of rock. This is also secondary porosity. Then porosity depends upon the size of grain. How the size of grains contribute the porosity? The well-rounded and poorly sorted and highly cemented. The well-rounded sediment present in rock usually higher porosity than the fine grain sediment because the grains do not fit together well. Therefore, the primary porosity is higher in the well-rounded sediment. But in poorly sorted sediment, the porosity will be the less because of the fine grain fragments tends to fill the open spaces. If highly cementing sediment rocks have lower porosity because the pore space filled by the cementing material. जर cementing material सुद्धा जास्त असेल एखाद्या रॉक मध्ये तरी सुद्धा porosity कमी असते, आणि जर cementing material कमी असेल तर porosity मात्र जास्त असते. Suppose in conglomerate is highly porous, and therefore the conglomerate indicates high porosity, and shell is highly cemented and the shell is low porous. Okay, there are different porosity in different rock. In igneous and metamorphic rock, porosity is usually low because of these are the hard rock and it is a product of remelting and recrystallization of pre-existing rock and cooling and solidification of magma. Therefore, the minerals tends to be intergrowth, leaving the little free space. Therefore, in igneous rocks and metamorphic rocks, the porosity is less. Highly fractured igneous and metamorphic rocks have high porosity, but in case of highly fractured and highly weathered rocks are found in metamorphic and igneous rocks have higher porosity. Another is vesicular and fractured and jointed igneous rock have high porosity than amygdaloidal basalt. In basalt there are number of variety: vesicular basalt, jointed basalt, fractured basalt, and amygdaloidal basalt. Out of that, amygdaloidal basalt is less porous than the jointed and fractured basalt. And however, because of highly and jointed basalts have some fractures develop, and through this fracture the water can percolate from upper surface to lower surface, and storage of water is higher amount compared to the amygdaloidal basalt. Another is sediment rock. Limestone have low porous than the sandstone. Limestone have low porous than the sandstone and shale because of their cementing material. Limestone have highly cemented, therefore limestone have a low porous than the sandstone and shale because the cementing material is higher in the limestone. In other hand, sandstone and shale highly porous because of cementing material is less than that of limestone. These are the porosity. Another important factor is permeability. What is meant by permeability? Permeability means the ability of transfer fluid from one place to another place is called as permeability. Actually, permeability depends upon the porosity. Actually, low porosity exhibits the low permeability, but high porosity does not necessary to the high permeability. Means permeability directly related to the low porosity. If the rock is low porous, it may be indication of low permeability, but it is not necessary to highly porous rock is highly permeable, because of some of the rocks are highly porous but not permeable. The good example of rock highly porous and low permeable, that is the vesicular volcanic igneous rock, because of their vesicles are not interconnected with each other. If the rock is highly porous but not permeable, it is one of the best example of the rock is highly porous but not permeable, that is the vesicular basalt. Because of these vesicles, their vesicles is not interconnected with each other, therefore it is not necessary to highly porous rock is highly permeable, but it is by default low porous is low permeable. The coarse grain rock is usually high permeable than the fine grain. If the coarse grain rock is indication of highly permeable, but fine grain rock is low permeable, and sand are more permeable than the clay. The clay is low permeable, but sand is highly permeable. Some of the listed highly permeable sediment and low permeable sediment, the gravel and sand is highly permeable, whereas silt and clay is low permeable. And another chart is highly permeable rock and low permeable rock. The highly permeable rock is fractured basalt, jointed basalt, sandstone, limestone, and schist. Variety of metamorphic rock is highly permeable. In other hand, low permeable rock, that is the amygdaloidal basalt, vesicular basalt is low permeable. In sediment rock, conglomerate and shale is low permeable, and in metamorphic rock, gneiss is low permeable category of rock. Okay. These are the permeability. Means the groundwater occurrence totally depends upon the porosity and permeability of the rock, and porosity means the void air spaces in a rock. Means void gas in a rock is called as porosity, and permeability means the ability of transfer fluid from one place to another place. Okay. These are the groundwater characteristics of groundwater. Okay.